Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started with that. Actually, so before we take questions, Chris wants to talk about future integration.
Okay, so the WooCommerce integration with Thesis was really more about templates than anything else. It was about getting the WooCommerce data and stuff to show properly on your Thesis site without you having to do anything. Most of that involved how, making Thesis recognize how WooCommerce wants to deliver its content to templates. This has continued to come up in other integrations that we've looked at. WooCommerce is a little different. They kind of do things a little strangely. Most other plugins that do this, I'll give one example. I wasn't familiar with this one until last week, but it's called the Mail Munch plugin. But basically what Mail Munch does is what a lot of these plugins want to do now, and that is total template replacement on selected pages. So you may have a page in your WordPress database, and you're using this plugin that does this template modification. You say, okay, on this page, serve this landing page that I created with this software, or whatever it is. And that serving that involves wholesale replacement of whatever Thesis's output would be. Because Thesis doesn't work the way other themes do, it's not just a file. You don't say, okay, you were pointing here, now we're pointing here. It doesn't work that way with Thesis. So I've had to look at these things and kind of try and figure out how to make Thesis respect that, so that these other integrations that you're probably already using or maybe just be familiar with, so that they will just work with Thesis. Otherwise, you can't use them. It's just not worth the hassle trying to make it work. And I understand why people make the decision to abandon Thesis on that ground. It's not worth the hassle. I get it. So basically, I figured out how to make these things interoperable. And so in the next point release of Thesis, or whatever it is, 2.3.3 or 2.4, this new system that this new template system that will seed control, if a plugin wants to usurp that output, it's going to work. It's just going to work straight out of the box. It's going to be great. In addition to that, it's going to introduce a new feature to Thesis where I kind of don't like this, but this is what it is. You can just wholesale replace whatever Thesis is doing and say, hey, just serve my file. So you can, even though Thesis does this big data production and is going to render a template based on data at the very last moment, you can say, nah, just look at my file instead. So, if you don't like what the output is on a particular page, or want to do your own integration, or you've got a guy in Romania who makes you an HTML sales page and you just want to point to it, you will be able to do that, which I think actually probably will be pretty handy on a big scale.
Excellent. Okay.
I think Optimize Press and some of these other plugins fall into that heading as well, so that a lot of people use that stuff.
Yeah.
Hi, sweetie.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I've got my companion. No, Daddy needs this. I'm talking to people up here. Look at this. All right, just don't start banging on the keyboard. We're good. Okay, say hi.
Okay, so Julie says, I use Jetpack for VaultPress for automatic backups. Can I suggest a better alternative? I'm just going to say, Julie, I used VaultPress myself for 3 years, and every single time my website went down, VaultPress failed me. There was never a time when I had an emergency that I relied on VaultPress that it actually worked. And the only thing that, and what I did instead of that was since VaultPress would not work, it would not restore all the database tables. It would not restore all of the stuff. Database tables was my real problem. It wouldn't restore all the database tables. I had to rely on Backup Buddy. And, I lost the last time, and the time I finally gave up on VaultPress, I lost a month of sales data because that stuff was all being stored in database tables that VaultPress couldn't recover, didn't even capture, let alone couldn't recover. And now I haven't gone back to look at VaultPress in the last 3 years, but I wouldn't I would say that Backup Buddy or something like that is probably a better alternative. The other thing is that, continuous backup over HTTP is if you're restoring for that, it is a very slow process. And so if your site's mission critical in any way, like if you've got a store that you have to bring back up after it crashed, you can't rely on VaultPress or any of the other continuous backup over HTTP, because the restore process can take hours. Whereas if you were using Backup Buddy or something like that, you could restore in 10 minutes. So that's my thought on that. And Steve asked about something better than next gen. I've started teaching photo gallery. That's the name of it in the WordPress repository. The reason I chose it is that it's got a nice little button there where you can select and says, only load JavaScript and CSS on gallery pages. Which means that if you've only got one gallery page on your site, then you're only going to get that code one time. So that's the primary reason I chose that, because almost everybody just loads their junk all the time, everywhere, and it is inimical to a fast site. Inimical, whatever it is, you don't want it. If you want your site to run fast, you only want plugins to load their resources when you need them.
Yeah.
Okay, so Chris, you wanted to talk about process. Somebody was, and this is not really a good beginner topic, I don't think, but
I'm just going to give the super basics.
Okay, go ahead.
So, all right, so hang on. So for stylistic customizations, we just start with the Thesis admin, working off the design panel that Rick has shown you guys. The design and the content pages are where your first stop. See if you can achieve what you want to achieve there. That's step one. Step two is if you've determined you can't achieve what you want to achieve through those pages, then we're going to probably use custom CSS. Generally, people have questions that are resolved mostly with CSS, just little design issues. How do I change the look of this? How do I make this bigger? How do I move this? Put a background on that, whatever it may be. For those, you only want to place your code in the custom CSS panel that's accessible from the Thesis admin. Some people have just gotten accustomed to, over the years, using the skin editor and the skin CSS panel for some customizations. That's a big no-no. The primary reason you don't want to do that is because we keep our skins updated over time. I want to make sure that the CSS included in the skins is up to date. I can add stuff like WooCommerce handling styles. I've expanded the baseline CSS and the classic responsive skin, for example. And so in order for you to be able to get those changes on your site, you need to be able to update that skin CSS, and not like just going through and figuring out where stuff needs to go and adding yourself. That's crazy. We just need to do one button, one click easy. Let's update our skin CSS. But if you have placed customizations in there, they're going to get overwritten when you try to update that information. So you want to avoid that scenario at all costs. Stick all your stuff in custom CSS. It'll never be a problem. So that's really it. That's just the rule. Only edit custom CSS. Try to make whatever changes you can through design, and you're never going to have a scenario where your data is being overwritten or being jeopardized in an update.
And then there was the other part of his question was, so do you do your development on a local machine and then push it to Git and then push a Git out to the site?
You know what? That's all sounds way too complicated to me. I use a repository. I use a Subversion repository, so not Git. I use it because it's less complicated than Git. I just want to check the stuff out, make changes, check it back in. I don't actually do much of that for my live websites. I just pretty much do it on the fly. If there's a PHP error, I can correct it in seconds. It's not that big a deal. I can't tell you how many people through the years come to me and are like, "Oh, I don't want to tell you my URL. I don't want anyone to see the site before it's done." It's like, look, there's 7 billion people in the world and none of them know about your website or care. You can work on the live site and make some changes. It is no big deal.
And if your site's mission critical, so like Lanny's site, his mental management store, where you it's always got to be up, it can't ever be down, then you get hosting that has a staging system.
Yes.
And BYOB website is like that too, right? People pay money to be able to access content on my site, which means I never want it to fail. And my original plan for going to the original reason I went to WP Engine was because of their staging system, because software that I was dependent on, like Wishlist Member and Simple Press Forum, were flaky enough that if I upgraded I could have the site crash, or I could have things that were critical fail, right? I don't want my site to go down, but I also don't want to not be able to take money from people. So if I install an update and it makes it so the shopping cart doesn't work, that's not a happy thing either. And as WP Engine gave me the staging site where I can update those critical plugins that are a little flaky, that might fail. I can upgrade those things there, test them, make sure it's all okay first before I move on. And I can do it with a push of a button. So, people bandied this term staging about quite a bit. And now everybody and their brother is offering staging, but staging where you can create it by pushing a button, and then where you can test in exactly the same environment as you're working is irreplaceable, really, if the website is mission critical.
If you know you need that, you should definitely be paying for that.
Yeah. Those
staging sites are awesome. I've messed with a few through support, and it's pretty impressive. Just one click, you verify that's cool, one click, go to live. You can't beat that. I remember doing it 10 years ago, and just trust me when I say it was not nearly so pretty.
Yeah. So I think that's better than the whole, I'm not a big fan of developing locally anyway, but that's better than that.
I would discourage all local development, and the primary reason why is even though, you're setting those things up, the local development server, and it looks like it's operating like a real server, it is not. There are conditions that are going to be different. There's stuff that running in the code, errors that may pop up in the background if you're using like a debugger or whatever it is. Conditions are going to be different. You cannot rely on that. You absolutely cannot rely on local development.
Okay, so let's see. Would I recommend Gravity Forms as creating advanced forms in Thesis? Sure, I love Gravity Forms. I use Gravity Forms all the time. Charlie, what would be the best membership software for Thesis? Best is a tough call because you have to decide what it is that makes it best. I just finally, even though I've been bitching and moaning about how much I hate Wishlist Member for years, and never recommended anybody use Wishlist Member, even though I'm using it, I've just finally decided to embrace Wishlist Member primarily because of its ability to interact with Infusionsoft, right? So the criteria is entirely different, right? You might not consider the integration of email marketing with membership as being one of your decision-making rationales, but
That's number one.
But I've finally decided I'm not throwing Wishlist Member away because I'm going to, I'm going to use it and Infusionsoft together. And so it's so you got to figure out your criteria. But what one membership system I would not use is Woo membership. Because you think it's a membership system, but what it was really designed to do was to essentially create a club where you can, in the club, you can buy the products at a discounted price. That was its first reason for being. That's the only thing it does well, and it doesn't do anything else well. So avoid that. But I wouldn't. That's the only one I would say equivocally don't use anymore, because it just doesn't. What you want, I mean, if you're looking at the rationale, the best rationale for a membership plugin is that it creates WordPress users, so that you can use underlying WordPress functions for displaying content and hiding content rather than using proprietary functions. You want to. That's my, I guess, my strongest piece of advice about that.
Yes, I would echo that sentiment absolutely. There's some things. I mean, I don't know what you've seen messing with various software, Rick, but one thing that I'm concerned about is I'll use an example. EDD, Easy Digital Downloads, is a similar solution that leverages as much WordPress stuff as possible to do what it does. One limitation that I find a little bit annoying. It's not completed though. It just needs a cookie system built onto it. But if you are on a page of your website that is outside the purview of WordPress, so it could just be an HTML document on your server, right? You cannot then easily convey access protections to that page based on whatever level of membership that person has.
Sure.
So that little gap needs to be bridged for me to really endorse any of these wholeheartedly, just because every big marketer, every single one whose site I've ever worked on, has freestanding HTML pages outside the purview of WordPress. Those pages are critical for webinar signups. Some are landing pages, all that sort of thing. And occasionally you may want to restrict view of that content or access to that content based on membership level, that sort of thing. And it's just restrictive if you have to operate within a WordPress environment. You're restricted on URL usage. I mean, just little stuff that you would never think of, but it comes up on all these big-time sites, especially when you've been in business for a while. It's just these little situations where you need to be able to provide, you need a gateway. You need a bouncer at the door, and you don't know what property. You could be at this address down the street needing bouncers, and then 2 weeks later it might be somewhere else. But you need to be able to move your crews around, not just within that little WordPress that one WordPress installation ecosystem. And I'd say this hits home for me because I use 5, 6, 7 different WordPress installs to run DIYthemes.com. Part of the reason is, I'd have so many freaking pages to go through all the time. Like, my site would take a lot longer to work on if I had to deal with one omnibus WordPress installation to do it. So just something to consider with those plugins. You get the benefit of all the WordPress stuff, but then you might want to do something a little bit out of the ordinary, and then suddenly it becomes very difficult to do that. So it depends on what your needs are. It's kind of, you find this stuff out as you go along.
Right. And, the WooCommerce environment and the Easy Digital Downloads environments are probably the two most expensive environments to work in. I'm not saying that either of them are bad. I'm just saying that, if you're trying to build something on a shoestring, then there are a lot of other reasonable options available to you that don't require you to spend hundreds of dollars on subscriptions every year. So,
how about the wish list and Thesis? How much integration code was necessary for you?
None whatsoever.
Really?
No, none whatsoever. No, there's not an ounce of integration. It just works. I mean,
cool.
What I do in, what BYOB website is built on Thesis 2.3 and uses a bunch of my I mean, I dog food all my stuff on it, right? So I use a bunch of my boxes and that kind of stuff. And so I use my I use Wishlist Member to apply user roles to different membership levels. I can use my display content by user role box, which is, which is something I love. It's a box that
That is
works
cool.
really nicely in Thesis. You just drop it in. You can choose which content you want to display based on which kind of criteria. And while I haven't published all of these, to the extent that somebody wants them, I have the one I published is display content by user role, but I do have display content by membership level for wishlist member, and I have display content by membership level for WP member. So I have written two other, and actually I have display content by membership level for Woo membership. So not that I advocate that, but I did have to create that for a site that I was working on. So it's a very easy integration at that point.
Yeah, that's great. That display content by membership level, that kind of speaks to what I was bringing up earlier. That's great. That's really great. Super useful.
Okay, so let's see. Todd asks, so what CSS framework is Thesis built on? Is it built on Bootstrap or Foundation?
Great question. It's not built on any of those because they all give you a 10,000 square foot house and you only needed 1,800 square feet. That's the problem. Thesis wants to give you 1,800 on the nose, not one bit less, not one bit more. Now that's not exactly possible. The classic responsive skin, for example, has styles for WooCommerce. You may not be using WooCommerce. Yeah, you get 1.5 kilobytes of extra information on your style sheet. But we're talking about like Bootstrap. You get oh my God, Bootstrap's huge. And then you can pick and choose the parts you get added on there as well. All of my CSS, my DIY themes and stuff with the skins is based on my golden ratio typography theory of design, I guess you might say, where everything is kind of based on one mathematical unit and then extrapolated out from there. So I try to cover all the basics about what HTML tags you might be using. So I basically got all the typographical styles for lists, all the stuff, lists, headings, block quotes, all that, all basics. And then we've got spatial stuff like content, sidebars, menus, things of that nature. So the basics are all covered. Input styles, you got, email inputs, password inputs, text inputs, text areas, radio buttons, checkboxes, those sorts of things. So all the basics are covered in there, but there is no framework to speak of. All the stuff in the Thesis skins is interactive with the golden ratio typography, meaning that if you change your font size and your content width, and then your variables all change, well, all that stuff in the style sheet is going to change accordingly. That's not the way any of these other CSS frameworks work. So Thesis is a continuously variable system, I guess, based on that adapts to your input.
And that was essentially what I was getting at in the beginning when I was talking about there's this trade-off between flexibility and speed. Bootstrap is very, very flexible, but very, very heavy. And that's the beauty of this. You don't have to load a bunch of stuff you don't need. You only have to load what you need.
Well, you could also, all that stuff can be added to Thesis very easily. There's a few methods you can do it. You can paste it all into custom CSS. I wouldn't recommend that. You can filter the CSS output and add that to the style sheet every time a style sheet is written. So, I mean, if you want to throw in any frameworks that you like, that's easy to do. But like Rick said, it's coming at what I consider to be an extreme cost, a cost I'm not willing to pay. But, that's something a decision each site owner can make individually, and all that stuff can be added if that's what if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Melissa asked if there's any reason why she shouldn't update to 2.3 using agility. No, I updated to 2.3 the day it came out with agility, and I haven't had any problems with it. There's no, that is, all of the underlying agility facility works just fine with Thesis 2.3. Kat asks, why wouldn't you use a header image layer under the header text? You can, and we're going to talk about that on Tuesday. Right? It's just a question of what's a beginner thing and what's a not a beginner thing. And if you got to write CSS, that's not a beginner thing. So, but you absolutely can do that. The same thing is true, Dala. Yes, you can absolutely write a little piece of CSS that will center the header image. There's not a problem with that. It's just that's not a beginner thing. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of things because people have asked a couple of skin editor questions, and I'm going to show you those very briefly, not because, I mean, I don't really think of this. I think if you're working in the skin editor, then you want to, come on Tuesday and learn how to use a skin editor. But just to demonstrate what Thesis is capable of, we're going to go to the front page template, which is the template that we're looking at. Eris asked me if I could show how to put the menu below the header. Here's how you do it. You drag the menu below the header. You save the template, and I suppose you flush the cache. And there it is. The menu is below the header. That's how you do it, right? One other person is asking, well, how do you remove the page title? Now, not a good idea. You should not remove the page title. The page title is an absolutely essential thing for SEO. And if you don't like the way the thing the page title says, change it. Right? Change it into a sales pitch. Change it into something that makes sense there. It doesn't have to be named home or blog. It can have, a sales pitch like thing. But having said that, if there was a compelling reason for you to say, Google doesn't matter and I don't care what happens with the SEO on this page, you can come over to the post box, click show the tray, and then just drag headline. Oh, whoops, you got to shift drag it.
It's got to go up a level first. Yep. Yeah. You
shift drag headline up here into the post box, let it go, and then drag headline down here to where it says drop orange boxes here to hide them in the tray. Right? See, when it turns yellow, that's where it wants to go. Right? So it wants to go here or it wants to go there. If you see that yellow, if you let go of your mouse, that's where it's going to go. Well, here we want to drop it in the tray. Once you've dropped it in the tray, save it, and flush the cache. And now we no longer have that. Okay. So those are a couple of things. I mean, we're not going to talk about the skin editor anymore because we're going to talk about it extensively on Tuesday. But that's how easy that kind of manipulation is once you are interested in learning how to use a skin editor. Okay, let's see. Does Beaver Builder plugin work with Thesis? Actually, it does. Yeah, it works fine. Although it undermines sort of the underlying rationale for Thesis, because anything Beaver Builder can do, Thesis can do. So, you're probably better off trying to understand the Thesis's tool set, before you decide to overlay another tool set on it, because that other tool set comes with its, all of its own weight. And so Beaver Builder on top of Thesis, a page that's been edited by Beaver Builder is going to have a ton of extra stuff slowing it down that it wouldn't have at all. You wouldn't need at all with Thesis if you knew how the Thesis tool set worked. So, let's see.
Do you know offhand how Beaver Builder does its templates? Does it use template include?
It does not use templates.
WP. Oh, okay.
It does not use templates. It's a content filter. It's a content filter.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah.
So it's data driven. So it does. Whoa. I mean, you move shit around or stuff around, and it saves that data.
So it's putting shortcodes in your content.
It does not put shortcodes. No, it does not do that. If you flip over to your content, if you're not looking at it in the Beaver Builder view, but if you're looking at the straight content view, all you see is the content, and you don't see all the rest of the stuff. It does not add stuff to the content.
So it must have their own database stuff that's associated with particular pieces of content and then overlaid if necessary.
Yeah, and a lot of it is similar to query boxes where you could pick something and put it in. But again, Beaver Builder can't change the header, can't change the sidebar, can't change the footer. And what's more important than that is that Beaver Builder is write it once, use it once. You want to use it again? Write it again. Now, sure, you can copy it, but now you have two copies of the same thing. You don't, two actual copies, right? And now if you change this copy does not change. So it's write it once, use it once, over and over and over again, which is not a professional way to build a website. Right. The professional way to use a website is if you need something more than once, then you create it so that it's only used. You only have to create it once, and then you can edit it once, and it edits it everywhere.
Yeah. I mean that is the basis of Thesis right there.
And it's the basis of real web development. Right.
Yeah. Object-oriented development. Right. You use the object exists in one place. And it gets you called upon when needed, but there's only one of that object. There's not 50 of it.
And I know that some people may think that's a little too esoteric for them, and they don't really care about that. But that's what makes the site faster. That's what makes the site something you don't have to throw away 2 years later when you want to change something. Right? It is what it makes the difference between a professional website and something an amateur threw together that has no real lasting value because you can't come back in and implement modern tools with it. And so, I know it sounds like
that said, I'm still waiting to see my first professional website.
Okay, fine. Fair enough.
Still waiting. One day.
But the concept of create it once, use it many times is the foundation of modern web design, and that's what you get with Thesis that you don't get with Beaver Builder. Now, I know that they're talking about, changing some of that stuff around, but nobody really knows where this whole page builder thing is going. We know where it's been.
I do.
It's been bad, but maybe you do. That's great. Yep, that's great.
I want to build one.
Well, if you can build a front end, build a front end template editor where a person can see the development of the template in the context of their content, you would own the marketplace. So I'm sure that where you are right now is not that far away from it, but For whatever reason. The funny thing is, okay, we should just back to questions instead of shooting the shit. But, there are a lot of people who can't visualize what they're doing on their site without actually having the stuff in front of them. And so they say, well, I can't tell what I want to do with my site until I put this text here. Maybe that's not going to be the right text. Maybe it's going to be too long or too short, or I don't know. I can't do that. So I got to figure that stuff out first. So being able to see a template evolve with front end content in it would be the sort of thing that would be helpful to people like that.
Yes,
But
I originally wanted that to be the way Thesis skin editor worked, but then I quickly realized that templates and output is not a one-to-one correspondence.
no, you're right. It isn't.
So to get the control I needed with Thesis, it was not going to be possible. But if I don't have to be aware of all templates and I only have to concern myself with one, then I can say, oh, I'll just select this page from my WordPress content database to serve as my skeleton.
Right.
And then I can go and compose a template around that if I only have to be concerned with one template at a time. So there's a little bit more to that as well. That's pretty cool. Interesting extensions of Thesis IP, I guess.
Well, the thing that nobody has yet, what everybody has right now, except for Thesis, is every single change is its own individual thing. So it's not like a box that's used and used and used and used. Mm-hmm. And if it changes options, it's changed everywhere. It's a box, and it's another box, and it's another box, and all of those boxes are different. And you change one, you don't change them all. And at least everybody I've seen. I've looked around, but I haven't seen anybody really care about build it once, use it many times like Thesis is.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I've seen. It's poor data modeling.
Yeah.
It's just a bad way to run it anyway. It's actually a lazy, kind of easy way to do it from a developer standpoint, but you're just constantly producing unnecessary waste.
Right.
Very much. And then all that weight is just offloaded onto the user, right? Like your WordPress database is now 5 times too big because you got a bunch of crap you don't need. Like I have an ethical problem with that. I'm not going to hang anybody over it, but I don't think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Does Thesis play well with, where'd that go? Oops, CloudFlare. Yeah, of course. You have to put CloudFlare in development mode if you're going to make changes. And if you think that's a problem, then you have that problem with everything, because CloudFlare is a massive caching system, and it doesn't care what changes you make unless you put it in development mode while you're doing those
Someone was
things.
asking me that, like, why can't Thesis play nice with caching systems? I'm like, I don't think you understand the way caching works.
Right.
It takes a snapshot at this point in time, and nothing changes.
Right.
Sorry, your problem is with caching, not with me.
Right. Okay, let's see. Whatever. Oh gosh, I must be jumping through the middle of these things. It seems like I keep seeing the same question over and over and over again. Rick, will Thesis 2.3 be more mobile friendly when editing? If I try to make quick changes on my phone, it won't work in the skin editor.
Yeah, skin editor is not designed for use on a mobile device.
Okay, I haven't tried that.
You like dragging the boxes around. I can only imagine what a nightmare that would be, trying to do that. No way. You can use the data manager. That's the only thing I would ever recommend to use in mobile. Even that part of the design is not made to be mobile responsive, primarily because of the absolute damage you can do with, certain activities in there that you may not have meant to take.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you guys want a mobile responsive skin editor, I can take the next year off and figure that out.
Yeah,
there's other problems that are more important.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that most people do their editing not on a phone. So it's an outlier question, but it's an interesting one.
It is. It is.
Will that affect other plugins that did work, like Event Calendar plugin? I'm sorry, Sherry, I don't. Oh. Yeah, there probably are some plugins that I don't know the Event Calendar plugin. I just had to abandon my plugin because it's just not PHP 7 compatible. And I haven't found the right one to come back to. But I'm not if the Event Calendar
I think
plugin
this is in the forums.
Is that right?
Question. I think so. Can she confirm? Does that plugin not work with 2.3?
Actually, Sherry, I'm going to unmute your microphone if you've got one. Let's see. I can find you here. Sherry Smith. There we go. Okay, Sherry, I just unmuted your microphone. Do you have a mic?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Yes.
There she is.
That was just in relationship to adding the ways to switch off what Thesis is doing to utilize the template that a plugin uses.
Okay.
So like, and I haven't tried the event calendar since the latest update.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know if it'll work or not. And it was just a question. Did the changes you make be for, the shopping cart thing that I hate, but will that affect other plugins as well, like the event calendar, which utilizes their own template, or did the last time I tried it out?
Did it work with Thesis before?
Not really. I could get the calendar.
That would be my guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't work before, so I didn't know if what you did for WooCommerce would affect other plugins that utilize their own templating. And then you said that that's a future direction you're going, is allowing plugin templating to be used versus Thesis templating.
Yeah, without getting too detailed here, the WooCommerce stuff is a little more basic. WooCommerce does template replacement in a very idiosyncratic way, one that was kind of tough to kind of unravel and figure out. A plugin like the one you're talking about, and most of the ones I've seen, use a very simple replacement. WordPress says point here, and these plugins say no point here. I would guess that your plugin operates that way. That's the absolute simplest way to do it. That the code that's going to make that work is not yet in Thesis, but it will be in the next release whenever that is. It's going to be soon, but I've been ironing out some other issues as well.
Okay, and as
So
long
I would
as
expect that to be better soon.
as long as I have a microphone, does having a lot of templates within Thesis affect the load or how it works, or it doesn't matter unless they're being used?
It doesn't matter unless they're being used. I mean, it really doesn't matter. It would take a couple million probably to make a difference.
Well, it does have an effect on the admin side, depending upon what your server host has set up for max input bars. Because when you save the skin design options, you're actually saving all of the options for all of the templates and all of the possible options. Well, you're sending all of the possible options for all of the templates.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Right. And so
the data you're messing with right now, it's actually one piece of a much larger data set that gets treatment when you hit the save button.
Right. So
and I did have to increase that memory size, but which is what made
That's
me
another
ask
change in the
this
next
question about load and all that other stuff. So
yeah, but it doesn't have any. It has no effect on the front end. Right. Again, that's the concept I was getting at about how you have all this flexibility, but it doesn't affect page load. Yeah, it affects something on the admin side, but it does not affect anything on the front end because
I do want to note one thing. You can have, if you have a bunch of boxes, like I was doing support on somebody's site the other day, and they probably had 200 boxes. beyond whatever came with their skin, that they had created and saved. That can affect runtime overall. It's unlikely to with most boxes, but for example, a nav menu box, the nav menu box relies on the WordPress nav menu system. Unfortunately, the WordPress nav menu system is extremely poorly coded and extremely heavy, meaning it's slow to do what it does and it requires some resources. So if you've deployed 6 nav menu systems in your design, I would strongly advise against using more than 2 because of what that does to loading times. Like it bothers me greatly that I have cleaned up so much of Thesis, and yet I still have to just rely on the WordPress nav menu system, and its performance hit is literally double what just a bare bones Thesis is. So I lose 100% of my efficiency just by having a freaking WordPress nav menu box on there. So that box, the query box, is also another one that's pretty weighty. And we actually made enhancements to Thesis to suppress resource usage on the query box. That's in 2.3 as well. But I couldn't do anything about the nav menu. So there are some boxes where you just want to be aware that you don't want to use too many of them. And the nav menu would be the only one I would caution against right now. But anyway, that's a little bit too much detail.
Well, it is a good point. It's a good point for beginners that play in that get in the template editor, the skin editor. They do have this tendency to create a new HTML container. They don't give it a name. They don't remember where they're using it. They don't know if they can delete it, so they just create another one. And you see this accretion of lots and lots and lots and lots of boxes that they may or may not be using. They don't know for sure.
Right.
They can't tell them apart because they haven't named them, and so it's something that a beginner has to be mindful of, because if they aren't mindful of it, it's a problem.
I just helped a guy the other day who his nav menu wouldn't change, but he was changing the options. He wasn't changing the right one of his 3.
Right. Yeah. No, I see that all the time. Okay. So Jody Murphy, I'm sorry, Jody, I was looking for your question and I lost it, but I found it again. Where should you plop the pop-up email opt-in form code in the Thesis Classic skin? So you've got pop-up form code. Where should you put it?
Is it script or is it HTML?
No, I think it's JavaScript.
Did the provider give you any instructions, like before the closing body tag?
Yes, I think it was before the closing. I think his original question was either immediately after the opening body tag or immediately after the closing body tag. I don't recall which one.
For something like that, I would think
okay.
it would have to go before the closing body tag.
Yeah, he says before the closing body tag.
Perfect.
And so go ahead, give him an answer.
Tracking scripts on the site menu on the Thesis admin. Under the site menu options, there's tracking scripts, and I've been looking at that lately. I kind of dislike the name tracking scripts, but another kind of ubiquitous name for that would be footer scripts. But there is no such thing as a site footer. You know what I mean? It's not accurate to say that. It's not the same thing as a footer on a design. I dislike the naming of all these things, and I acknowledge that tracking scripts is also a pretty weak name. I named it that because when that convention came about, everyone was placing like click trackers, stat trackers, everything else, KISS metrics, whatever it was, all this stuff belonged in before the closing body tag. And so instead of calling them footer scripts, I call them tracking scripts. But bottom line is tracking scripts in the Thesis interface is any scripts that you need to add to your site that appear before the closing body tag. And I think the little tooltip there actually says that if you click on the question mark.
And so if you want to do this globally, that is, if you want it on every page, this is a place to do
Yeah,
it.
that's a good point too.
Now, if you are in a situation where you only want this on specific pages, send me an email. I have a box I will send you, which allows you to set tracking scripts or put scripts in the head, put them at the closing body tag, or put them immediately after the opening body tag, which I've discovered some people insist on. And you can do it on a page by page basis or a template by template basis. So,
That's cool.
so if that's the kind of control you need over it, send me an email. I'll send you the box. Let's see, where do we go? Ken asked, do all Thesis skins support WooCommerce integration? Well, the WooCommerce integration in and of itself, yes, works on all skins. Not all skins necessarily have the right CSS for everything. And so, for example, I have not updated my skins yet, and forced to have some WooCommerce specific scripts. And when I look at it in Agility, I think that the headline looks funny, and there's stuff that could be improved because I haven't done it yet. But out of the box, it doesn't really matter what skin you're using; it's going to work. I don't know. Have you
basic functionality? It's going to work.
Have you run into any issues with skins that have already added WooCommerce functionality to it? Like,
you know what? I've not actually examined any that had it because they would have relied on Surge's integrator plugin.
No. The guys, who are they? I've got one of theirs, Clipcart, has its own absolutely own, Themedy has its own Thesis integrate, or I'm sorry, has its own WooCommerce integration. Does not use the plugin at all.
Interesting. I wonder how they did that.
They did it similar to the way Surge did it, but they also did something that
we did have an e-commerce box that we distributed just to people who asked me for a while, and I actually did encounter this in the wild the other day, so maybe they were using that as a guide or something.
Yeah.
It uses a similar method to what eventually made it into Thesis.
Well, and at some point, I'm going to create a box that allows you to break all the elements down, so you can rearrange the elements the way you want them, so that just like any other query box, where you can choose what image and what image size, and is there a button or not? Is there two buttons? Do you have the short description? Is there a sale price? All that kind of stuff that you can drag around.
Right.
So, to give you full control, but it's in the further distant future. Somebody asked about the Thrive's Themes Content Builder plugin. It works great with Thesis, actually. I had somebody else say, Thrive isn't working.
It works.
It does work fine with Thesis. I've tested it. Most of what you can do with that page builder or that content builder, you can do in Thesis without it, but it does work just fine. Let's see. Okay, I'm late. You may have. Okay. Julie says, okay, so for those of you who are still here and who missed out on this, on the front page of BYOB website are all the rest of the Thesis 2.3 seminars coming up. So if I can find my mouse here, where is it? So again, we've got Thesis 2.3 on Tuesday for the DIY website builder. Thursday is for the web design professional. The following Tuesday is for WooCommerce store owners. And the final one is the beginner's guide to the Thesis 2.1 skin editor. So you can sign up for those. They're all free, open to the general public. you might have covered this. Is 2 columns of content plus sidebar possible? Yes, it is possible, but you need to either choose a skin that has that support natively, or you have to know enough about responsive CSS and HTML to be able to create that in classic responsive. So it just depends on, I mean, those are your 2 choices, really. It's not possible with the click of a button in classic responsive any longer. And most people don't think of that as actually a very useful format in current modern web design, right? So the regular sidebar is going by the way, not to mention the, a double sidebar. So.
Yeah, well, I've been saying this for years, and we actually moved away. People say, well, how come you don't offer classic responsive in a 3-column format like you did in the original Thesis anymore? And the reason is eye tracking studies and usability studies, user testing, all that stuff consistently shows that users' error percentage, the amount of interactions they make with your site that are wrong, go up. The amount of time they spend on each page goes down, and the number of people who take an action that a page was intended for, such as signing up for an email form or buying a product, whatever it is, all those metrics take a negative hit if you have more than just a single content column. That's why Rick's saying that even just a traditional sidebar is going by the wayside now, is because we've learned it's antithetical to the goals that most people have for their pages. So it's just not effective.
It's a distraction.
Yeah.
So Regina says, after updating to Thesis 2.3, my sidebar on the home page disappeared. How do I get it back? Well, it probably didn't disappear. At most, what happened was the widgets went out of the sidebar and went into an inactive widgets column. So you may not be familiar with this, but WordPress, if we go to appearance and widgets, here's the Thesis Classic widget section. Well, here's this thing, inactive sidebar not used. Well, all these widgets here were in the 2017 theme. And so that was the original theme on the site. And so that's the original sidebar. And it could very well be that I have seen this happen from time to time, that the widgets get up and go into an inactive sidebar. That's not typical, but it does happen. So they haven't disappeared. If you just scroll down, you'll probably find them sitting under inactive sidebar. And if not there, inactive widgets. And you can just drag them back up to the sidebar. So would adding a footer menu to the site affect a site speed? Well,
trivially.
Yeah. But, Agility's got a top and bottom footer, and I still got it in 1.4 seconds. So,
yeah, I'm merely lamenting the fact that Thesis achieves it in time X, and adding one nav menu makes it X plus X.
Right.
X is very small, relatively speaking.
Right. Oh, Kevin says, why not schedule another session? I'm an hour past my time. Well, I've got 4 more sessions coming. So by all means, attend any one of those. Let's see. Sherry says, can't scripts also be added on a template by template basis without a box? Yes, they can, but those are all in the head. Right? The template, the JavaScript box that comes with Thesis puts them in the head of the template. So the thing I do
for what it's worth.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I said the thing I do is just add the option to put it at the bottom of the body tag or at the top of the body tag. So that's the only thing I add to it.
So one of the it's kind of an ugly fact because I don't want people using code if at all possible, just because there seems to be such a negative kind of recoiling whenever people have to use code. The fact is, at a certain level of a certain type of site, it's in your best interest to place things with code. It's the easiest to maintain. It's the easiest to take one action and have it propagate out to exactly where you want it to. So like for the DIY Themes website, I run a lot of stuff through custom code and place it through hooks. I place scripts or whatever it is because that's the most efficient way for me to do it. And in some cases, if you just want scripts or something to appear on very specific pages, I really think doing it with custom PHP is probably the best way to do it. You have to acknowledge that my requirements are kind of idiosyncratic. I just want this thing on a couple of pages. That's an idiosyncratic requirement. And to deal with that, you're going to need some sort of idiosyncratic solution, maybe something that doesn't leverage, the real nice options that are provided for you, but that does tap into the hook system that Thesis has, which is also very, very advanced for developers. Like it's a really good hook system. I think it's the leanest one out there. It actually has a tracking feature now where we can sniff out hooks on your site, and we can do stuff with it that we have not introduced yet. But if you're so inclined, you're not afraid of that sort of thing, that's a good answer for a lot of script placements and other types of stuff. It's actually the most secure way to place scripts as well.
And not a beginner's task.
Not a beginner's task.
Right.
Absolutely not. That's why I qualified the heck out of it.
Okay, I think actually we got all the questions. Okay. If you've asked a question and I didn't answer it, oh, pardon me. Okay, so John's got a question. I have an update to Skin Classic Responsive 1.3.1, but there's no place to save the existing skins in my dashboard. John,
It's in the skin editor. Oh, I see.
John, you're not to update your skin. All you do is go to the manage skins and press the yellow button that says update to skin. You don't have to move skins anywhere. You don't have to do anything like that.
You don't need to back that up. It's not like that.
No, it's just let's see. I'm not sure. I don't think this is actually on the latest version, so maybe I've got a skin update here. Yeah, okay. So I've got a skin update. So it's a simple matter of clicking this button. You don't need any place to put it. You don't need to upload the skin or anything like that. All you do is click the button that says update flex. And then question 2. John, did I answer your question or did I misunderstand your question? Let's see. Steve asks, is there an easy way to upgrade from Thesis 1.8 to 2.3? No, there's not an easy way, but
yes.
Well, okay.
5 seconds.
Sure. You're going to have to do some work to make your site look the same, depending upon how complex your site was. I mean, you're a member of my site. You can come over here. I think it's a case study now that I say that. No, those are not. I did a seminar not that long ago. Okay, let's go to Thesis seminars. Not that long ago, that was...
Is it under the Thesis 1 seminars?
No, it's not. I must have just scrolled right past it.
Oh, there it was. I just saw it. It had 1.8.5 in the title.
Oh, yes, right. Okay, so there's this one, 1.8.5, side to thesis 2.1, but there is another one. It's going to be very close to this, though, right? It's going to be very similar to this. That's why I thought it was in. That's why I thought it was in case studies, because I thought I did a bigger one of those. Let's see. We converted a static HTML site and a Flash site. Okay, I guess not.
Well, here's the scoop. I mean, I think where Rick's going with this is that it's switching from Thesis 1 to Thesis 2 is not, even though the designs, the base designs kind of look similar, the functionality is completely different, and how we arrive from point A to point B is completely different. So your customizations are no longer relevant in Thesis 2. And so therefore, if you're going to switch to Thesis 2, you have to ask yourself, do I require, is it essential that I kind of map over my old design and all my old customizations, or is this a perfect opportunity for me to start fresh and, approach this with a cleaner, leaner slate, because it's easier and cheaper to do things with Thesis 2 than it is with Thesis 1. So I would say that only in the most extreme cases, and I would never even recommend it personally, would you ever want to go from Thesis 1 to Thesis 2 and really try to keep a lot of that old stuff in place. Like I encourage people, I say, if your Thesis 1 site is working fine and doing what you need it to do, there's no super compelling reason to update. And if you feel there is a really compelling reason to update, then maybe that portends a pretty big shift in your business where you're ready to move on. Like, Thesis 2 is a new design. Maybe it's time for your new design. But unless you're in that boat, I don't think it's worth trying to carry this legacy weight from the past to carry that forward. I think it's a highly technical process. It would cost money or time, if you have the expertise. And I don't see either one of those as really being worth it. Only you could make that decision for yourself whether or not it's worth it. But I would say I don't see too many examples out in the wild of that really being necessary.
Okay, so any idea when Sensei integration is going to be available for Thesis?
I'm surprised there's interest. I'm not sure. So I was working with a live test site where someone had some content. They decided not to use Sensei, so I need a live testing environment with some actual real-world Sensei stuff to do it best.
I'll give you one.
But so if I have that, I'll try and get that, by June or something like that. I had it mostly built. It is mostly built in your current version of Thesis. You could actually uncomment some of the stuff I commented out and get it working. It just wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't refined. So if all you require is that Sensei stuff shows up on pages, we could actually get you going in a matter of minutes right now. If you want it pretty, then that's going to take a while.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure. I don't even know what the extent of Sensei's functionality is. Like I'm just now learning through Rick and support what the extent of WooCommerce usage is. I don't really know how people were using that plugin. Sensei's in the same boat. Sensei has a lot of little stuff. You can do widget stuff. And I've not even addressed any of those issues. So I don't know whether or not that stuff works or not.
Okay, so then Kevin asked a question, is there any way to put a copyright notification on your website with the dates automatically updating? Now, I think some skins do have that. I know Agility does, for example.
Yeah.
This is a box in Agility. If you're already working in a skin and are committed to that skin, send me an email. I'll send you a copyright box.
Oh, you did the original one. Okay, let's see. We've got I know one of our skins has one. Effectus has one for sure. And then let's see if Flex does. Flex has one as well. So Effectus and Flex have them for now. We may end up adding those to other skins as well. But and then Rick has the add-on. So.
Yeah, I'll just email you a box. Just email me the request. Okay, well, I think that's it.
Let me run something by you. I know we've talked about this before in various kind of in various ways, but it's beginning to come together for us now. So, for example, let's say you're going to edit the footer of a website, okay, with Thesis, and you've got the attribution box, but you want to replace that with the copyright box. Well, under the current system, you'd have to replace that on each template that includes it, right? So let's say it's 6 templates, you have to do it 6 times.
You want to see how that works in agility?
Yes, I do. Yes, perfect. Great.
Because
You did.
I hacked Thesis to make it so that headers and footers cross update from skin content, and their content can change. So this took me a long time to figure out. But
I bet it did. I've looked at various solutions. They all kind of run up against the wall at some point, and I'm just like, eh.
Okay, well.
But I've got a good one in mind for the future.
Okay, a typical footer, the typical footer has 2 main parts. It has the footer and it has the bottom footer. So if you click on the footer, you have a choice of
oh my gosh,
how many columns you want and what their configuration is. And
you're using your box filters to change the CSS output to accommodate that,
yes.
Right?
And then you can choose what each of those columns has, whether it's a featured content box or an icon content. These are boxes that I've created, right? A call to action box, a copyright box, a WordPress menu, or you can make it behave like a normal Thesis box, which says, don't put anything in there, I'll add it. And so in this case, I'm using the none. I'll drag something there myself, right? For the query box that shows these images. And then in the skin editor, the first footer has all 4 columns. And in the third column, second column, has the query box that's new to the menu and has the featured image in it set up. But
was that already in there on the template? And then you're just showing it or hiding it?
No, it well, because this is unique, and that is the answer is none. None. I'm just going to put whatever I want in there. It was created from scratch, like a regular Thesis box, and put there. But these widgets aren't. These, if we change, we come over here and say, and I cannot keep the skin editor open for this because that makes it choke. But if I come over here and say, well, I don't want a widget, area in number 4. I want a copyright in number 4. If I save the options, I come back over here to the skin content. Now I have that choice of the copyright here, and I can fill the copyright out stuff. And if I go back to the template editor or skin editor and look in the footer, now footer 4 has a copyright in it.
Right.
And footer 3 has the widget, and footer 2 is empty, and column 1 has the widget area. So this is this was not easy to figure out.
No, you're doing a lot there. A lot of moving parts right there.
There are a lot of moving parts. I mean, integrating the skin array, the template array and the boxes array.
You were playing with fire for sure.
Absolutely. Well, the other little cool thing I have is that I do have a template restore system that will restore default
Ooh,
footers, default headers, and will restore individual templates to their defaults. So this is just box and template settings, not skin design or anything like
so
that.
we've been talking about this particular thing internally,